I worked at a gas station for a couple years in my mid-30s. I've always had jobs that barely let me scrape by, so working at a gas station wasn't much better or worse than many of my other previous employments. If you've ever worked at or been to a gas station at night, then you know that there's always only one employee. Maybe larger gas stations have multiple, but with my experience, it was always only one person. There was never anything to do, so you really only needed a single person. But it definitely made it eerie sometimes while being there alone. I'd stand and look out the window by the counter, seeing only the dim lights by the pumps with the field of darkness behind them. The location of the station I worked at was on the edge of town, a few minutes from any other buildings. We'd get a lot of traffic from truck drivers and cars that would travel between the cities, which was very common for work in the area. When this happened to me, though, it was the beginning of spring and had been raining quite a lot. What's great about when it rains is that most people choose to pay with a card instead of cash, meaning far less people would actually enter the store. It was raining heavily this night, and very few cars were even coming up to fill their tanks. I guess we weren't busy in the daytime either, because all the shelves were fully stocked, leaving me with absolutely nothing to do but sit there and wait for the clock to run down. Past midnight, I was seeing maybe 1 or 2 cars pull up every hour. One man actually came in to pick up a pack of smokes, but that was it. After that, I was fighting hard to stay awake. It wasn't even that I was tired, I was just extremely bored. But then a car rolled into the station, followed by another, and then another. What are the odds, right? I started paying attention, watching through the side window. None of the people got out. They all just stayed in their cars, right next to the pumps. Keeping their cars running for a few minutes, I thought I might actually have to go out there and tell them that it's dangerous to leave their cars on next to the pumps. But then, a few doors opened and a few people got out. 5 people total exited the cars. They were all men and were wearing thick winter-type jackets. Leaving their cars on still, they began walking up to the store. All of the men made eye contact with me as they entered, while I stood at the counter. I'm not going to try to make myself sound brave or anything, because I was shitting bricks at this point. Just the fact that they left their cars on was a clear enough sign of what was about to happen. One of the men came up to the counter while the other 4 scattered around the store. The man spoke with confidence. I looked around his shoulders, seeing the other men grabbing handfuls of product and shoving them into their backpacks. The confidence they had in what they were doing, not even yelling commands at me or holding me at gunpoint, made me absolutely terrified. Probably more so than if I actually was held at gunpoint. They knew I couldn't do anything, so they didn't even bother to go through the effort of dealing with me. Everything going through my head, I never even answered the man. "We'll be gone in a couple minutes. Everything will be fine," the guy said. One of the other men came up and jumped over the counter. "Open it." I did as he said, letting him take the cash from the register. Being at night though, there was barely anything in there. The guy held up a few dollar bills, showing the man on the other side of the counter. "Where's the rest? We don't have any more. My boss makes sure it's mostly empty before we switch shifts." Of course, the man did not look satisfied with that answer. He stared at me for what felt like an entire minute, but then he smiled. "Have a good night, bud." He motioned to the others, and they walked back to their cars and drove off. Without hesitation, I called the police. I was almost 100% sure that they were about to hit a nearby gas station in an effort to grab more cash. I alerted them of my concerns, and they sent multiple officers to that location, as well as an officer to mine. It turned out I was right. They did go to the neighboring gas station, but the officers arrived too late. The worker there had been robbed clean and had some mild injuries, but from what I heard, he was mostly okay. It's been years since this happened, and thankfully I never saw them again, though I'm unsure if they ever got caught and arrested. I feel really guilty for some reason about that other gas station worker that got hurt. Mostly because I didn't get physically harmed in any way. I don't know the full story of what went down at their station, but I feel lucky that it didn't go that way for me. Maybe the worker tried to fight back, or maybe he didn't, I don't know, but sometimes I think it's just best that you accept you're in a bad situation and that there's nothing you can do. I work at a convenience store at the corner of a small shopping strip. It's basically a smaller, local version of a 7-Eleven. I worked morning shifts for a while, which started at 3 a.m. and ended at 1 p.m. I agreed to these shifts because they were always the slowest and required the least amount of work. All the parts of my job included tending to customers, filling the shelves, and taking out the trash, which pretty much meant I had nothing to do. It was the middle of winter at the time this happened, but I live in a warmer state, so it usually rains instead of snows. It was a light pour outside, but it was enough to keep most people away. On early mornings like these, I like to lean against the front of the building outside and smoke to pass the time. I wasn't supposed to, but there wasn't anyone to stop me. Along the shopping strip were maybe 8 or 9 other stores connected to ours. All of them were stores with normal hours, so none of them were ever open until around 6 or 7 in the morning. So when I saw a car pull into the parking lot while I was smoking outside, I of course assumed they were coming to the convenience store. I burned out my cigarette and tossed it in the trash, then headed back inside and around the corner. There really was nothing to do, so I was just waiting for the customer to come in and leave so I could get back to being bored alone. After a few minutes of nobody coming in though, I walked back around the corner and checked outside the door. The car was still there, parked in a parking space nearby, but the headlights were off, and as far as I could tell, nobody was inside. Again, it was lightly raining outside and all the other stores were still closed, so I was a bit confused as to where they went. I took one last look around, seeing nobody, then closed the door and went back inside. 30 more minutes of nothing went by, and I think I was just standing in the same spot behind the counter for the whole time, spacing out. I checked the time, seeing I'd only been at work for a little over an hour, and decided I should check the trash cans around the store and toss them in the dumpster out back. I walked around to each trash bin, putting the bag in the cart and replacing it with a new bag. As I was doing this, I heard a faint click sound come from outside. It sounded like something snapping or breaking, but between the rain hitting the roof and the sound being somewhat far away, it was impossible to tell what it was or where exactly it came from. In the moment it happened, though, I barely even thought about it. It just didn't seem like anything worth thinking about. Just another random sound these old buildings made. Once I filled the cart with all the trash bags, I rolled it into the back room and unlocked the back door that led to the dumpster. I sighed, seeing as the rain was pouring down harder now, of course, right when I actually needed to go outside. Regardless, I pushed the cart through the rain and over to the dumpster, which was directly across from the door. After tossing in all the trash, I turned back and started heading for the door, but I noticed something was out of place. The store directly connected to mine had its door wedged open. I'd never seen anyone there earlier than 6, so it made me think. I went back inside to get out of the rain and went out to the front door and looked at the other store's door. All the lights were off, and it looked locked up and empty like it always was at this time. I thought for a few more minutes before figuring I had nothing better to do and went back outside by the dumpster and walked up to the open door. Again, all the lights were off, but it seemed to lead into a small closet-type room, which then had another door, probably leading to the main storeroom. I stepped inside, standing in between the doorway so as to not make it seem like I was trying to sneak in or something. Standing inside now, I could hear someone moving around in the other room, walking, opening drawers. It sounded like they were making a mess, which then got me thinking even more. I called out, hoping to get a reassuring response from a neighboring store worker. The noises stopped. I waited a few seconds before I realized that this was not normal and something was definitely wrong. I stepped back outside and into the rain. As I quickly made my way back to my store, I recognized something was missing from the door I had just left. It took a second to figure it out, but then I saw that there was no handle. It was just an empty hole where the handle and lock usually are. Then I looked down at the wedge that was holding the door open, seeing now that it was actually the broken door handle. I ran back into my store, locking all the doors, and called 911, as well as my store manager. Once I knew they were on their way, I went up to the wall connecting our stores and put my ear against it, listening to the suspected robbery taking place. Whoever it was had to have known that I called the police, because they were moving quickly now, running all around, tossing or knocking things over. After 30 seconds to a minute of this, I saw lights flash outside and heard sirens approaching the back of the building. The footsteps quickly moved to the back of the store before a bunch of loud yelling came, which I assume was the officers. I checked out the back door after a minute, seeing a less hectic scene, and walked out to talk to the officers. I thanked them for coming so quickly and gave them a statement. The man who was arrested was found with a pillowcase full of nearly $6,000 worth of stolen items. He also had an empty firearm, along with a variety of tools used to break down doors and locks, and unknowing to me, he'd also broken into the store 2 spots down as well. It's unclear whether or not the man knew I was working at the time, but my store lights were on, so it isn't likely that he would have broken into my store. But several large scratches were found on the back of our door handle, which may have been from a previous attempt. I used to work at a Walmart a couple of years ago. This was my strangest experience. I mostly worked overnights and would stock shelves. It was an easy job for me. I would start at like 9 p.m. and at first the store would actually be open, but would close only like 2 hours into my shift. There would never be very many customers in that time anyways. A good number of us worked overnights because obviously Walmart is a really big store. On this one night I happened to be working in the pets and supplies aisle, which is in the back end of the store. I had been working in that general area, but not that exact aisle earlier in the night, but by now it was about 1:30 p.m. Our store closed at 11, so we had been closed for 30 minutes now. As I was in the pet supply aisle, I was just stocking one of the shelves by myself. When the store closed, I would often put in headphones and listen to music while I worked, which is what I was doing. It helped work go by faster and easier for me, but out of nowhere I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It appeared as though somebody had walked by. I looked over, but they were now gone. I assumed it to be one of my coworkers, and once a few minutes went by, I kept working. Then again, I saw somebody at the end of the aisle out of the corner of my eye. I looked over, and this time the person did not walk away. It wasn't one of my coworkers, though. It looked like just some guy that I had never seen before. When I looked at him, he disappeared behind the next aisle. I got up and walked over, and then looked down the next aisle. When I did, I saw the man disappearing out of that aisle, and into the one after that. I took out my headphones and then radioed in on my walkie that I thought I saw somebody inside the store who wasn't supposed to be here. After that, I kept doing my work. About an hour later, I went to the back room. That area was pretty large in our store, but I was the only one back in that section at the time. When I was walking over there, I was sure that I saw the man again. I could see him hiding behind a box underneath one of the shelves there. I didn't stare at him and I acted like I never saw him. I was going to walk past, but I decided to turn around and then go the other way instead. He was maybe 30 feet away. When I began walking back, I heard noises behind me, even with my headphones in. I started running for the exit to go back into the sales floor. I heard footsteps behind me when I did. When I got there, I opened the door, and the man did not come out after me. I ran to find the nearest employee. That was Al, who was working in the electronics overnight at the time. I told him that I saw a man in the back, and he decided to come back and see. I had a bad feeling, and I wondered if the guy was dangerous. We both went back there anyways. When we opened the door to the back, we heard the sound of another door opening. It was coming from one of the doors we had back there that opened up to the outside. They were rarely used. We walked in further just in time to see the guy walking out of the store and the door closing behind him. After that, he was gone. I still don't know how the man got inside. My only guess is he somehow avoided all employees and hid inside the store until after we had closed. I also wondered what he was going to do to me when he was hiding in the back, and then followed me. Luckily, I quit that job not too long afterwards.